He raises my hand for the kiss, then announces he's loved someone else for 10 years. The crowd doesn't breathe. I don't either. His voice, projected through the speaker system we paid extra for, cuts through the air like glass. Every face turns toward me, then toward her. Third row, red silk dress, legs crossed. She doesn't flinch. I can't hear the music anymore. Just the static hiss of silence and the weight of 150 people trying to make sense of what they just heard. My mother presses her hands to her chest. The flower girl starts crying, maybe because the energy shifted, maybe because she knows something broke. He still holds my hand, gently, as if he's done something poetic. A slow, soft grip. His fingers are warm, his voice is clear, and he is smiling. She taught me what love means, he continues, eyes locked on the woman in red. And for 10 years, I've carried that truth silently. Today, I honor her, here, in front of all of you." End quote. The officiant, Mrs. Farley, opens her mouth, then closes it. She drops the printed vows on the ground like they're tainted. Her hand trembles. I try to speak, but my lips are ice. I look at the camera guy, he's still recording. He doesn't stop. Of course he doesn't. We paid him. The drone whirs overhead. I want it to crash into the archway. A man in the second row, his old college roommate, leans forward, confused. Someone whispers, "Is this part of the ceremony?" It isn't. This isn't a flash mob. This isn't performance art. This is my wedding. I spot the woman in red again. She's calm. Too calm. She knew. She didn't come to watch. She came to receive. Her eyes are locked on him, not me. She wears a small, satisfied smile. My hand is still in his. I yank it back. The audience gasps louder than they did for the betrayal. He flinches, but only a little. His smile falters. Then he turns to me, lips parting like he's about to apologize or explain. He doesn't. He just says, "You deserve to know." Do I? Do I deserve to know this in front of a crowd? Do I deserve to be broken publicly like a glass dropped in a hall? I look around again. My grandmother Marla isn't here yet. She called earlier to say she was running late. She told me she'd bring something important. I had brushed it off. Right now, I want her here more than anyone. I want her voice, her silence, her anything. I steady myself. My knees feel untrustworthy. The floor feels like water. The aisle is long, and suddenly, every step I took down, it feels like a walk into a trap, into a stage, into a show where I didn't get the script. I turn to Mrs. Farley. She is pale and shaking. She says nothing. I whisper to her, "Can we stop?" She mouths, "I don't know how." No one moves. Phones are out. This isn't a wedding anymore, it's a broadcast. I step back. He follows. "Danielle," he says softly, as if my name is a plea. I didn't want to lie anymore. To this day, not anymore. Then why today? Why now? Why not when we got engaged? Why not last week? Why not before I paid for the photographer, the flowers, the music, the dress? He looks at me like he's noble, like he believes this moment is some kind of sacrifice. I look back at him and see something else. Not love, not even guilt. I see relief. Relief that it's over, that the lie is unwrapped, that the applause, or the consequences, can now arrive. Like he's done something courageous. Like ruining my wedding is an act of honesty. I glance at the woman in red again. Still smiling. Still. My throat burns. A girl in the front row takes a photo. I step off the platform. The officiant steps aside. And just like that, I become a spectator at my own wedding. He keeps talking. To the crowd. To her. I don't hear him. I walk behind the arch, down the small hallway lined with bouquets. I reach for a chair to steady myself. A bridesmaid follows. "Danielle, should we do something?" I shake my head. What could we possibly do? This isn't a moment to fix. This is a message. He turned our wedding into a megaphone. And I became the warning. He planned this, every second of it. But I wasn't the only one he humiliated that day. 2 weeks before the wedding, we sat in silence on the back porch, threading little jars with wire to hang from the oak trees. Mason held a mason jar, how ironic, and threaded the wire with the precision of someone defusing a bomb. I smiled at him, but he didn't look up, just said, "You're quiet tonight." "I could say the same to you," I replied. He nodded like I'd made a factual observation, not a question. Then he reached for the tray of finished jars and started arranging them by size. Inside, the kettle whistled. I went in, poured 2 mugs of tea chamomile, his favorite, and handed him one. He took a sip and made a face. "No sugar?" "You never want sugar," I said. He looked puzzled. "Right." That moment should have been nothing, but now it plays in my head like a warning siren in the dark. Not for what he said, but for what didn't follow. No laugh. No thank you. Just that dull shrug of his shoulders, as if even conversation had to meet some quiet standard he never explained. I think I knew then. But knowing and admitting are cousins who haven't spoken in years. I'd ignored little things for months, him not reacting when I tried on the dress, the way he walked 10 steps ahead when we went to pick out table linens, how his phone always seemed face down at dinner. He blamed work. I blamed stress. Neither of us blamed love. I'd gotten a letter from Grandma Marla that week. Thick envelope. Loopy cursive across the front. I didn't open it. I left it on the sideboard next to a stack of RSVP cards. Grandma had always been skeptical of Mason. Said he reminded her of a preacher who used to make women feel holy while doing unholy things behind the altar. I didn't want her doubt contaminating the wedding. I wanted clean joy. Clean floors. Clean storybook pages. The venue had called that day, too. A woman named Janet. "Hi, is this Danielle Rivas?" she asked. "Yes, this is she. Sorry to bother you. Just wanted to confirm that you're the primary name on the booking." "I am." "Why?" "Well," Janet said carefully, "we had a duplicate calendar entry under a K. Vaughn. It's probably just a clerical thing. K. Vaughn." It was the first time I heard her name. I asked Mason about it while we were folding menu cards. He didn't look up. "Oh, I just submitted 2 entries to make sure the reservation went through," he said. "Why use another name?" "Was testing the calendar system. Didn't want any glitches. Nothing shady." "Who's K. Vaughn?" "Just a placeholder." It's clarineted. His tone was so even, so boring, that I believed him. Or at least, I wanted to believe him. Even in his texts, he felt cool to the touch. That night, I lay in bed next to him, listening to his even breathing, wondering if I should get up and open Grandma's letter. I didn't. I convinced myself she'd write something pessimistic, some warning about a man who smiles too often without his eyes. I wanted to protect my joy, not challenge it. But that kind of joy, the kind that needs defending, is a lie in lace. The following morning, the dressmaker called. "Hi, just checking your husband never submitted the final measurements for the surprise dress." "I'm sorry, what surprise dress?" "Oh," she hesitated. "I thought this was a gift. Never mind." Mason shrugged when I asked. "It was going to be a joke, something for the honeymoon." "Forget it." I did forget it. At least, I forced myself to. But forgetting is just postponing pain. Later that day, I found him in the kitchen reading something on his phone. He smiled, not at me, but at the screen. When he noticed me watching, he turned it over and asked what I wanted for dinner. "I don't know," I said. "Then let's not eat." And we didn't. We went to bed in silence. The jar light still lay in the porch box, unfinished. He started disappearing into errands that didn't exist. Last-minute meetings, suit fittings. I stopped asking. I told myself, this is normal. People get weird before weddings. Cold feet, hot tempers. What I didn't realize was that he wasn't getting ready for our future. He was setting the stage for someone else's coronation. He wasn't nervous. He was rehearsing. He was refining his performance. The Friday before the wedding, I opened the closet to find his shoes perfectly shined, his suit steamed, and 2 cufflinks glinting on the dresser. One had a tiny engraved K. I asked him, "What's this?" "A gift from an old friend." "It's no case as that." "What kind of friend?" "She helped me with some stuff. It's not a big deal." He said it so plainly, so softly, that it didn't even feel like a lie. Just packaging. By that night, my chest hurt. Not from panic, but from stillness. It was like being stuck in a snow globe, beautiful, until you realize you're not breathing. I held the unopened letter in my hand for 20 minutes, sitting on the porch in my robe. I almost opened it, but I didn't. I slid it back into the drawer and told myself, after the honeymoon, after the photos, after the crowd, because surely, I thought, no one would use a wedding to cause harm. Surely, this wasn't a performance. Surely, I was the bride. Not the setup. Not the decoy. Not the foil. I sipped tea that tasted like dust and watched a single jar swing in the wind, the wire barely holding. I didn't realize until now, it wasn't the wind that made it move. It was the tension in the knot. I didn't know warmth could be a warning sign, and the dress he bought wasn't for me. The next fracture was quiet, so quiet I almost missed it. It came through a phone call while I was driving back from the tailor. Janet, the venue manager, had the kind of voice that apologized even when she was right. "Hi, Danielle," she asked, almost hesitant. "Yes, this is she. I'm just calling to verify the name on your wedding booking again." "F is one node. We already did that last week," I said, a little tired. "It's under Danielle Rivas." "Right, yes, that's what I have now. But we just noticed something odd. When I pulled up the original payment confirmation, it came through under a different client entry, K. Vaughn." Silence. I didn't say anything, because I couldn't yet. "We assumed it was a planner or someone booking on your behalf," Janet added quickly. "But it's listed under the same email used to confirm all your decor specs. As a livel. What's the full name?" "Kendra Vaughn," she said. I parked the car in a rush, engine still running, and tried to keep my voice calm. "Is that name on the guest list?" "No," Janet replied, "but I checked and, well, the payment was made by check. The note says, 'Do not list bride's name in calendar entry.'" I ended the call without another word. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I went home and made tea again without sugar. I watched the steam curl upward like smoke from a building I hadn't realized was already burning. Then I went looking. I didn't know exactly what I was hoping to find, but I knew there had to be more. I started with his suit pocket. Empty. Then his sock drawer. Then the glove box in his car, receipts, a phone charger, one Starbucks gift card, and a crumpled dry cleaning tag. I pulled it out. Name, K. Vaughn. Order, silk gown, custom adjustments. Pickup, March 28th. Notes, do not steam, client prefers natural fold. I sat in the driver's seat of his car for a long time. The tag crinkled in my hand like a soft betrayal. He had bought a dress for someone, and it wasn't me. I called him. "Hey, what's up?" he answered, casual, unbothered. "What's a silk gown for?" A beat. Then, "What are you talking about?" From the cleaners. Under Kendra Vaughn's name. He didn't answer right away. "I don't know who that is." "You booked our venue under her name." Another pause. Then he laughed a dry, humorless thing. "Danny, you're spiraling." "I'm connecting dots." "You're imagining things. I used a placeholder name. That's all." "Kendra isn't a placeholder, she's a person." "I don't know her," he said again, firmer now. "But that's the thing about liars. They always repeat themselves when they're scared." I didn't argue. I just hung up. My phone buzzed moments later. A text. "I think you need to relax. It's wedding stress." I didn't reply. Instead, I walked to the kitchen drawer, opened it slowly, and pulled out Grandma Marla's unopened letter. I held it like a detonator, the kind of truth you can only open once. But not yet. Not yet. That night, I looked at him across the dinner table. He chewed his food slowly, drank water, said nothing. No questions about my day, no apology for lying, no curiosity about my silence. I studied his face. The clean jawline, the tidy part in his hair, the way his fingers tapped twice against his glass before each sip. I had memorized this man, and yet, I didn't know him at all. A stranger, wearing love like a rented suit. I went to sleep early, but I didn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, counting every breath he took. Even his sleep was silent. The next morning, the dressmaker called again. "Hi. Sorry to bother, just wondering if your husband wants a different hemline on the custom piece. It's a tighter fit than we expected." I asked her to repeat herself. She did. "He never submitted sizing," I said. "Well, someone did. A woman. She said she was the intended recipient. I didn't ask for a name. I didn't have to." I thanked her and ended the call. When he came back from his so-called jog, I was standing in the hallway with the dry cleaning tag in one hand and my phone in the other. "I know," I said before he could speak. "I know about the gown, about the name, about everything." His face twitched, but not in shame. In calculation. "What exactly do you think you know?" Wrong answer. The right one would have been silence. Or truth. but liars double down. I think you've been planning something, I said. He looked down, then back up, meeting my eyes with a strange stillness. I have. That admission didn't feel satisfying. It felt hollow, like he'd just handed me a glass of water in a burning room. Why? I asked. He said nothing. Instead, he walked past me to the kitchen, opened the fridge, took out orange juice. I'm not going to do this with you, Danny, he said quietly. And just like that, it became my problem again. I stood there, the silence heavy, and realized something that should have terrified me but somehow brought relief. The smallest lies rot the deepest roots. It wasn't one lie. It was 100 tiny ones, stitched into every ordinary moment. Moments like, no sugar? Like just a placeholder. Like, you're imagining things. He had curated my trust like it was a script, and I had read every line with conviction. The dress wasn't for me. The wedding wasn't for us. This wasn't a mistake. This was choreography. And the dress he bought wasn't for me. The morning of the wedding felt like someone else's dream. My hair was curled and pinned with baby's breath. My dress zipped without a hitch. The bridesmaids took photos, laughed too loudly, mimicked ease, but there was something beneath the surface like frost forming on the inside of the windows. No one said it aloud, but they all felt it. A tension that didn't belong in white. Even the air in the bridal suite was strange, heavy, perfumed, like a room that had just been cried in. I thought it was nerves, cold feet maybe, a wave of exhaustion from months of planning. But in the mirror, my eyes looked wrong, more alert than afraid, like a girl preparing for battle in a veil. At 10:12 a.m., Mrs. Farley, the officiant, knocked on the suite door. She smiled, but it didn't touch her eyes. "Everything okay?" I asked, rising from the vanity. "I just need a quick word," she said. "In private." End quote. End quote. My maid of honor Jess squeezed my shoulder and left, closing the door behind her. Mrs. Farley held a single page of paper, printed in a neat serif font. Her fingers trembled slightly. "Mason asked me to read this before the vows," she said. My pulse rose. "What is it?" "He called it a dedication. He said it would add meaning. Did he show you this before today?" "No," she admitted. "He sent it last night." She passed me the paper. I read the first line. "Before I marry the woman I respect, I want to honor the woman I love." I sat down. "Is this a joke?" I whispered. She didn't answer. I folded the paper, slipped it into the pocket of my dress, and met her eyes. "Don't read it," I said. "I can't disobey a request from the groom." "You can if it turns this into a circus." She hesitated. "I'll follow your lead." I nodded once. Outside, the music swelled. The drone buzzed overhead, part of the wedding video package Mason insisted on. "It'll look cinematic," he'd said. My cue came. I took a breath, stepped into the sunlight, and began walking down the aisle. Every face turned. Cameras clicked. My uncle wiped his eyes. A child sneezed. Normal things, wedding things. But Mason's face wasn't normal. He was already smiling. Not the overwhelmed, heart-struck smile of a man about to marry the love of his life. It was calm, measured, and his eyes weren't on me. They were searching the crowd. I followed his gaze. Third row, right side, aisle seat. A woman in a red silk dress. She was already looking back at him. No one noticed except me. As I reached the altar, Mrs. Farley began speaking. The usual words, honor, partnership, love. But I barely heard her. Mason's fingers brushed mine as she talked. He held my hand, then lifted it gently. Then he spoke. "Before we begin," he said, stepping slightly forward, "I'd like to say something." I stiffened. Mrs. Farley opened her mouth, hesitated, then stepped aside. He cleared his throat. The microphone caught every breath. "I've waited a long time for this," he began, smiling toward the guests. "But not for the reasons you might think." I didn't blink. He turned slightly, gesturing to the crowd. "There's someone here who's carried my heart longer than anyone else. Someone who has loved me in silence, in truth, and in ways I never deserved. And today, I want to honor her." People shifted in their chairs, confused, curious. "She taught me what love means," he continued, "and for 10 years I've carried that truth silently. Today I honor her, here, in front of all of you." Murmurs. Phones raised. My mother gasped. Mrs. Farley turned pale. I stood still. My hand, still in his, went numb. He looked directly at the woman in the red dress and smiled. Kendra Vaughn didn't flinch, didn't pretend, just looked back at him like this was always the plan. People began whispering. Is this part of it? Is she the maid of honor? Who is she? A camera flashed. I pulled my hand back. He turned, surprised but not upset. Danielle, he said softly, you deserve to know. I didn't speak. I turned to Mrs. Farley. Her face was frozen. Her hands clutched her binder like a lifeline. She started, then stopped. I looked at my father. He stood in the aisle, unsure whether to come forward. The red-dressed woman remained seated. The sun caught the hem of her dress, setting it ablaze in light. A metaphor, too perfect. And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't a mistake. This was a reveal, a curated unveiling. He'd turned our wedding into a performance, and I was the set dressing. A bridesmaid moved to stand beside me. Danielle, she whispered, say something. I deviated video slide. But what does a person say when their life unravels in 4K resolution? I didn't cry. Instead, I looked at Mason and asked, quietly but firmly, is she your real bride? He didn't answer, which, of course, was the answer. I turned to the crowd. I scanned the sea of faces, most shocked, some sympathetic, a few entertained, and just one radiantly smug. Kendra. Her smile widened as I stared at her. She lifted her chin, like a queen being crowned. The microphones picked up everything. I could have run, could have screamed, could have tossed my bouquet and stormed out like the wronged heroine in a romantic tragedy. But I didn't. I walked to Mrs. Farley, reached into my pocket, handed her the printed page, the dedication. Read it now, I said. She looked confused. Read it, I repeated. Her voice trembled. Before I marry the woman I respect, I want to honor the woman I love. Her name is Kendra Vaughn. She taught me patience, devotion, and how to wait in the shadows. This day is for her. Silence. Even the drone stopped moving overhead, hovering in place like it was listening. I stepped off the platform. Every camera followed me. I didn't stop. Not until I was behind the floral arch, out of the frame. Just me and the wind. Everyone saw me standing there. But no one stepped in. What he said next made even the officiant look away. After I walked off that stage, I didn't cry. I didn't scream, throw flowers, or collapse into my mother's arms. I didn't need to. Because the damage was already done, filmed, recorded, uploaded, and whispered about before I even reached the dressing room. The audience had seen the act. Now they were just waiting for the encore. My humiliation. But I refused to give them that. I stood in front of the full-length mirror, still in my wedding dress. The fabric looked heavier now, like it had absorbed every ounce of betrayal. My hands were steady, but my breath wasn't. I focused on the details, the pearl buttons, the lace along the sleeves, the faint lipstick smudge on my collarbone. One of the photographers had caught me mid-laugh earlier that morning, during the bridal party portraits. I'd laughed like someone who thought they were walking towards something beautiful. I wanted to grab that version of myself and shake her, tell her to run. Behind me, the door creaked open. Janet, the venue manager, stepped inside. Her heels clicked across the hardwood. She didn't speak right away, just held out a white folder. I debated giving you this now, she said quietly, but I figured better to have it than not. I took the folder, confused, opened it. Inside was a printed invoice. Booking name, Kendra Vaughn. Date, March 2nd. Ref number, VN2047. Venue A, Sunrise Crest Event Hall. Amount paid, $3,800 by personal check. Note, do not list bride's name in calendar entry. It's not. The handwriting was his. Mason's signature curved with its usual flourish, the same looped M I'd seen on dozens of forms. I stared at it, my stomach folding inward. This was processed through our system, Janet continued. He followed up twice, said he was surprising someone. Someone, I repeated flatly. Janet hesitated. He also requested specific lighting, a red hue across the aisle, said it was, for her. Of course he did. The woman in red, Kendra Vaughn. She'd been spotlighted from the moment the music started. Every detail had been curated not for me, but for her. The lighting, the seating, the angle of the drone, All of it. I had planned a wedding. He had staged a shrine. And I was the offering. "Thank you," I whispered to Janet. She reached into her bag and pulled out something else, an RSVP envelope. "She was never on the guest list," she said. "But this came in from a different address, same handwriting. RSVP card marked yes, just her name, no +1. Even her attendance was designed to look like fate." I sat down in the makeup chair, the invoice trembling in my hand. The mirror reflected something new now, not just a bride abandoned at the altar, but a woman who'd been rehearsed out of her own story. Every moment of the last year suddenly shifted. Every date night, every silence, every "don't worry about it," twisted into a different shape. How long had he been planning this? When did I become a placeholder? I pulled my phone from the drawer, scrolled to the last message from Grandma Marla. "Call me when you get a second. I have something I need to say." I hadn't called, because I was too busy choosing centerpieces and coordinating favors, too busy trying to build something while the foundation had already been sold to someone else. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, the guests lingered. Some whispered, some stared. One woman cried quietly into her corsage. The man beside her patted her back like they'd just witnessed a funeral. And maybe they had. A funeral for illusion. I looked for my mother. She was sitting on the stone bench near the rose bushes, talking to someone on the phone. Her hand covered her mouth. Then I saw Kendra, still in the third row, still radiant, still waiting. For what? I didn't know. Applause? I wanted to storm down there, to demand an explanation. But what good would it do? She already had what she wanted. She had her moment. The story he'd promised her. The audience. The altar. And the girl he would sacrifice for the final act. I opened the folder again, scanned the invoice. March 2nd. He'd paid for the venue nearly 6 months ago, 2 months before he proposed to me. I laughed. A short, breathless sound. Not from humor, there was none left, but from the absurdity of it all. He'd planned the betrayal before he even asked me to be his wife. The proposal wasn't the beginning. It was the halfway mark in a scheme. He never wanted to marry me. He wanted to show someone else that he could. He turned our wedding into her coronation. That line didn't feel poetic. It felt surgical, like a knife finding the exact point between 2 ribs. I folded the invoice and tucked it into my purse. Outside, the sun had begun to shift. Shadows stretched across the lawn. The guests began to disperse. People hugged awkwardly. A few took last-minute photos of the venue, not of me. The fairy tale was over. But the evidence was just beginning. But when I found the invoice, the lie turned to fire. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was realizing how many people had known. Not just the venue staff or the dressmaker. Not just Kendra and Mason, but others people who watched it happen and said nothing. Like actors refusing to break character, even after the scene had turned cruel. 3 days after the wedding, I walked into the coffee shop I used to visit with Mason every Sunday. I shouldn't have gone. I knew that, but I was tired of hiding, tired of waiting for the sting to wear off. Common Grounds was almost empty. The same barista was behind the counter. Same indie playlist playing low in the background. Nothing had changed except me. I ordered black coffee. No sugar. I sat near the window, same table we always used. I remembered how he used to joke about naming the table after us. "Reserved for D+M," he said once. I laughed then. That memory burned now. As I stirred the coffee, I noticed a napkin under the table leg. I reached down and unfolded it. A name scribbled in blue ink. Kendra, with a heart. Dated 3 weeks before the wedding. I stared at it, stunned. Then remembered he had met someone here that day while I was at a dress fitting. Said he was finalizing a vendor deal. I hadn't questioned it. Now I saw it for what it was. A meeting place. Their Sunday, not mine. I stood quickly, coffee forgotten. Walked out into the street. Cold air hit my face like truth. This wasn't just betrayal. It was choreography. He'd been testing the edges of this performance for months, touching the set pieces, checking the lights, whispering lines to someone else while I was still memorizing my cues. I walked for blocks. I didn't remember the path, just the movement, the need to move. When I got home, Grandma Marla's letter was still on my sideboard. I'd left it unopened, out of fear or pride, I couldn't say which. But that day, the seal broke under my thumb without hesitation. The handwriting was slow and deliberate. just like her. Danny? I'm writing this because I don't think you'll hear me if I say it out loud. You love this man too much to see what's underneath, but I know that kind of man. I married one once. They don't hit, they don't yell, they perform. They learn your favorite tea, your bedtime stories, your mother's name. They give you everything but themselves. If he's cold now, don't wait for spring. Some men are winter forever. I sat down on the floor. Read it twice, then again. This wasn't intuition. It was prophecy. The signs had always been there, not just in Mason's actions, but in his absence, his lack of curiosity, his distance masquerading as restraint. Even his affection had structure, like it had been copied from somewhere. A performance for the role of husband. He didn't fall in love with me. He cast me. And the moment the final act came, he stepped into the spotlight and delivered his monologue to someone else. But I wasn't going to let that monologue be the last word. I opened my laptop, searched through our shared Google Drive. The wedding folder was still there, photos, budget spreadsheets, sample vows, and one odd file I'd never opened before. Draft, personal speech, docs. I clicked it. The file opened to a single paragraph. To the woman who stood by me while I changed, who waited without asking questions, who let me build the world I needed, this is my thank you. You were never in the way. You were the way. The file was dated 2 months ago. There was no mention of me. I wasn't the woman. He hadn't even bothered to rename the file. I screenshotted it, saved the invoice, took a photo of the napkin, scanned Grandma's letter. Evidence. It wasn't just about memory now. It was about facts. I wasn't going to collapse in grief. I was going to build a record. I posted the invoice on my private Instagram story. Just the image. No caption. Within minutes, the messages poured in. Are you okay? Was that from your wedding? Girl, is this who I think it is? And one from an account I didn't recognize. I saw them at the venue 2 weeks before. They were arguing in the parking lot. She was crying. He said something about getting through this one last act. The wedding was never real. It was a stage for his redemption arc with Kendra as his prize and me as the emotional collateral. But I wasn't going to be a tragic character in someone else's script. I was going to be the narrator, the witness, the one who wrote the final page. I drafted a statement. Short, clean. He didn't leave me at the altar. He delivered a love letter to someone else while I wore white. He used my wedding as a performance, but I kept the receipts, literally. Ref number VN2047. March 2nd. Paid in full. Let this be a warning. Some men don't fall out of love. They just find better lighting. I posted it at midnight. By morning, it had been shared 7,000 times. Someone tagged the venue. Someone else created a TikTok reenactment. Another stitched it with a clip from a Netflix docuseries about emotional gaslighting. I didn't read the comments. I didn't need to. Because it wasn't about revenge. It was about record. I wanted closure. What I found was evidence. And he never expected I'd publish the invoice. 3 days after the post went viral, Grandma Marla showed up in person. No warning. No text. Just the sound of her old Buick pulling into the driveway and the unmistakable clack of her cane on my front steps. I opened the door still in pajamas, half asleep, my phone buzzing nonstop with follow-up requests from podcast hosts and one suspiciously cheery producer from a morning show. Marla didn't wait for an invitation. She walked in, looked around like she was inspecting a crime scene, and set a brown paper envelope on my coffee table. This, she said, lowering herself into the armchair, should have been opened before the wedding, but it's not too late. I read your letter, I said softly. You were right. She nodded like that wasn't news. That was the warning. This, she tapped the envelope, is the pattern. I opened it slowly. Inside, 3 handwritten pages, decades old, yellowed slightly at the edges. Not in Grandma's handwriting. My breath caught. Who wrote this? My mother, Marla said. Your great-grandmother. She left him the man I told you about. Left him the same day he tried to turn her into a ghost. I read the first few lines. He never screamed. He never hit. He made me invisible. He made everyone love him louder than I could ever speak. The danger wasn't in his violence. It was in how much I wanted to believe he loved me, just because he said so. My hands trembled. This wasn't about Mason anymore. Not just him. This was inheritance. A pattern. a lineage of women trained to explain away the quiet wounds. Marla leaned forward. "You didn't just get out of a wedding, Danielle. You broke a cycle. Everyone." I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that. I'd been carrying the shame like I'd committed the crime, as if my body being left at the altar meant I'd failed. But now I saw the truth. He didn't ruin my wedding. He revealed it. I offered her tea. She refused. "What I need isn't in a cup," she said. "It's in the next thing you do." I didn't know what that was yet. But I knew what it wasn't. It wasn't silence. That night, I sat in the living room with my laptop. The post had now reached 22,000 shares. A small digital army of people dissecting, defending, questioning, mourning. Kendra had remained silent. Mason, too. But someone sent me a clip, a Zoom recording from 6 months ago. A virtual panel on relationship psychology. One of the speakers was Mason. He looked polished, smug, introduced as a communications consultant specializing in emotional alignment. I watched him speak. "Authenticity is about control," he said to the camera. "If you can regulate the narrative, you control the emotional outcome. Love is about managing perception." It hit like a slap. Managing perception. Of course it was. That's what he'd been doing since the day we met, calibrating, observing, adjusting his expression like a dial. He hadn't fallen in love with me. He had studied me. My favorite tease. My emotional triggers. The pacing of my sentences. Even the color of my dresses, he once said I looked too bold in red. Now I understood why. Red was reserved for her. I pulled up the screenshot of the invoice again. Ref number VN2047. His signature, Kendra's name, paid in March. And something I hadn't noticed before. The notes field. Stage left spotlight soft red hue. Frame at third row. Begin music on approach. Frame. As if she were the subject of a photograph. Not a guest. Not a lover. A reveal. He didn't want to marry her. He wanted to debut her. It was performance art. And I was the white backdrop. A blank canvas. Disposable. I called Jess, my best friend, who had stayed mostly silent since the wedding. She answered immediately. "Hey," she said, "I've been meaning to." "Did you know?" I interrupted. Silence. Jess exhaled. "I didn't know everything." "What did you know?" "I saw them together. Once. A couple months ago. I thought maybe it was work. She runs that design firm, remember? You didn't tell me." "I thought you'd think I was jealous or something," she whispered. I didn't respond, because the silence between us had already answered everything. Even she had opted for performance. She wanted to protect the storyline, the happy bride, the pretty photos, the illusion. But I wasn't angry. I was just done. Done protecting the people who let me rot quietly for the sake of aesthetics. The next day, I drove to Sunrise Crest. The venue looked the same. Polished, elegant, still selling the dream. Janet greeted me at the door. "Danielle," she said, surprised. "Is everything okay?" "I need something," I said. "From the recording." She hesitated. "The drone footage?" "All of it." An hour later, I had a copy of the raw files. 4K footage, multiple angles, full audio. The drone hovered like a silent witness, capturing everything. His speech, the crowd's reaction, Kendra's composure, and my face. I watched myself. I looked. Steady. Too steady. Like someone already mourning something no one else could see. I clipped the video. Started with Mason's voice. "Before I marry the woman I respect, I want to honor the woman I love." Then the camera pans to Kendra. Then me. Then silence. I overlaid one sentence. "He didn't choose me. He cast me." I posted the video on a new page. No hashtags. No call to action. Just the truth. By morning, it had 2 million views. And by the afternoon, Kendra finally spoke. A post. Simple, but telling. "Loyalty doesn't make you innocent." I was the mirror, not the muse. I know what I enabled. She didn't apologize. But she confessed. That was enough. This wasn't a love triangle. It was a mirror maze. And Grandma said I'd just begun to build my own stage. The video changed everything. Not because it was dramatic. There were no raised voices, no confessions shouted into microphones. It wasn't even about the betrayal anymore. It was about the framing, the precision, The way a man could stand at an altar, claim love as virtue, and still orchestrate harm. People weren't outraged just because he humiliated me. They were horrified because they saw themselves in me. Their stories filled my inbox. My fiancé didn't cheat, he just edited me out of our life plan without telling me. I married a man who used me as a prop to make his ex jealous. Thank you. You named the thing I couldn't explain. There's power in naming. Because once you name a monster, it stops hiding in the dark. And Mason was never just a cheater. He was a director, a curator, a master of plausible innocence. But now the curtains were pulled back. I didn't want revenge. I wanted reckoning. I got an email from a journalist. Subject: feature request, The Staged Bride. I ignored it at first. Then another came. Then 5 more. By the end of the week, I'd been contacted by 2 national newspapers, 1 streaming docuseries team, and a publishing agent. I wasn't flattered. I was angry. Because the second you package a woman's pain, people want to buy it. They don't ask if you're okay. They ask for the rights. I met Grandma Marla for lunch at our favorite spot, the little corner bistro with the black and white checkered floors. She wore her usual cardigan and brought a hard copy of the original letter again, like she needed me to keep seeing the lineage. You should write your own story, she said, stirring her tea. I already did, I said. The posts, the captions. That was the opening monologue, she replied. Not the legacy. I laughed softly. I'm not interested in legacy. Then what are you interested in? I thought for a while, sipped my tea, looked at the women around me chatting, laughing, checking their phones, not knowing how close some of them might be to an invisible betrayal. I want people to stop explaining away harm just because it doesn't bruise. Grandma nodded. Then you need a bigger microphone. I didn't take the documentary deal. Or the podcast interviews. But I did say yes to the woman who wrote me a 3-page letter explaining how her mother was gaslit out of her own wedding. She asked if I'd speak at a closed women's circle. Not for press. Not for content. Just to speak. The event was held at a local community space, bare wood floors, hanging string lights, and folding chairs arranged in a circle. No stage, no microphones, just proximity. I brought the folder with the invoice, the napkin, Grandma's letter. They weren't props. They were proof. Each woman shared a story. Some were dramatic. Some whispered. Some came with sobs and others with blank faces that said, I'm still in it. I haven't escaped yet. When it was my turn, I didn't read from notes. I just stood and said, he didn't break my heart. He handed it back to me and said, this was never mine. Afterward, a woman hugged me so tightly I could feel her ribs shift. She whispered, you made me feel real. And I thought, that's the legacy Grandma meant. 2 months later, I got a certified letter. From Mason. Not an apology. A release form. He was asking me to sign off on the footage rights from the wedding for artistic use. He called it a docu-performance, examining the myth of modern monogamy. I didn't scream. I didn't reply. I sent it back with 1 sentence written in red ink across the bottom. Your art used my body without consent. He never followed up, but Kendra did. Not directly. She posted a photo of herself in the red dress, same one from the wedding, standing alone in an empty event hall. Caption: some roles cost more than the applause they earn. I didn't feel pity. I felt closure, because she finally saw it. He didn't choose her either. He chose control. Spring arrived without permission. The cherry blossoms outside my apartment bloomed in full, like the trees had forgiven something I hadn't. I started writing again. Not just posts, pages. Real ones. A memoir? Maybe. A collection of essays? Possibly. For now, just truth. The working title sat bold at the top of the document. The woman in white was never the bride. Every time I looked at it, I felt my lungs expand. Like my story had been underwater, and now it was learning to breathe again. I still had the dress. It hung in the back of my closet, not as a shrine, not as a symbol, as a reminder that I was never the mistake. He was just never the story. I was. It wasn't a broken wedding, it was a rigged audition, end quote. And I'd walked off the stage still holding the mic. And when he asked for my permission, I gave him silence. It took a long time before I could say the word wedding without flinching. Not because of the trauma it would always sting, but because of how the world reacted to it. People expected me to move on, to find closure, to heal, as if those things were destinations. Finish lines I could sprint toward if only I ran hard enough. But healing is not linear. It's not pretty. It doesn't wear white or carry peonies. Sometimes, healing is waking up at 2 a.m. and deleting a playlist. Or blocking a mutual friend who didn't want to take sides. Or standing in a thrift store, staring at red dresses, and daring yourself to touch one. Sometimes, healing is not saying anything at all. I kept writing. Quietly. My little essays turned into a manuscript. The working title remained, "The Woman in White Was Never the Bride." Publishers reached out. Some wanted to make it punchier, sexier, add more drama. One suggested changing it to, "Left at the Altar." I declined, because I wasn't left. I walked away. And that distinction mattered. The drone footage eventually made its way into a university's curriculum, Media Ethics 202. I didn't agree to it, but someone had spliced it into a unit on manipulation in public narratives. The class dissected the wedding speech like it was Shakespeare. One student messaged me on LinkedIn. "I'm studying the rhetoric of silence. Your refusal to speak at the altar was the most powerful line of all." Funny. He thought I was being poetic, but I was just too stunned to speak. Mason disappeared from the internet for a while, but people like him always come back. 6 months after the viral posts, he resurfaced on a new consulting platform. Different brand, same pitch. Helping couples find clarity through aligned communication. It's not for the Davided, it's not now. I bookmarked it. Not out of obsession, out of documentation. Kendra never posted again. Some said she moved abroad. Others claimed she changed her name. I didn't dig. Whatever role she played, she paid for it in full. The applause she earned came at the cost of her own script, and that was punishment enough. Grandma Marla passed away in early autumn. Peacefully. Quietly. The way she lived. She left me the letter from her mother. Framed, with a note tucked in the back. "You told the truth and stayed standing. That's more than most." I hung it near my desk. Some days I stared at it longer than I wrote. Other days I wrote until I forgot the wedding ever happened, until Mason's voice became just another line in a story I used to live in. Until I remembered I was never the supporting character. 1 year after the wedding, I went back to the venue. I didn't tell anyone. Just walked the grounds in silence. The grass had grown wild in patches. A new couple was setting up in the distance, white folding chairs, tulle bows, nervous groomsmen laughing too loud. I stayed far enough not to be seen, far enough to feel like a ghost. But not quite. I sat under the arbor where he once held my hand and announced his betrayal. The place looked smaller now, like it had lost its power. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my purse. Not a vow. A statement. One I had never spoken aloud. "You didn't ruin love for me. You ruined performance. And now, I choose honesty over aesthetics every time." I left it under the arbor, pinned by a stone. Someone would find it. Or the wind would carry it away. Either outcome felt right. I started hosting workshops not on trauma or betrayal but on narrative recovery, teaching women how to rewrite themselves into the center of their own stories. The most common sentence they shared? "I didn't know I was allowed to be angry." In quote, I told them, "Anger is not destruction, it's the door to the truth." One woman brought her wedding dress to the first session. She said she wanted to burn it. We didn't. Instead, we cut it apart and turned it into journal covers. We stitched their names on the inside. Repurposed grief. Rewritten legacy. I kept mine. It sits on my desk now, covering the notebook where I write things that no longer fit inside me. My story didn't end at the altar. It began there. Because the truth is, the wedding was never about marriage. It was a test. A final exam for all the roles I'd ever rehearsed. The quiet partner. The forgiving woman. The resilient bride. And when I refused to perform, that's when I passed. Not as a wife, but as a witness to my own becoming. It was never about who stood beside me. It was about who I became when they walked away. And maybe the altar was never meant for vows, but for truth. An hour after I posted the drone footage and closed my laptop, a message slipped into my inbox like a whisper I'd left unanswered for years. It was from Kendra. Short, measured. The way someone writes when they've already rewritten the message 10 times. You forgot something. You weren't the first. And I wasn't the only. There was no greeting. No sign-off. Just that. And 6 attachments. Screenshots. One from 6 years ago, a diamond ring in the palm of her hand, captioned, "We'll get there. Just let me figure out my situation." Another from 2 years ago, a hotel confirmation under his name. Booked the same weekend he told me he was away, clearing his head. Then, an email with subject line, "The Real Ceremony." Attached was a mock-up of wedding invitations, cream cardstock, gold lettering. Bride, Kendra Vaughn. Groom, Mason H. Clark. In the notes field, still confirming date. Have to resolve current situation first. There was also a scanned photo of a dress, white lace, sweetheart neckline. She'd tried it on. She had been his plan A. I had been the camouflage. A name to hide behind. A placeholder for his redemption arc. A final performance. He didn't just cheat. He rehearsed. I sat in silence, the cold blue light of the laptop painting my skin the same color as the truth, frostbitten. Then I did what I had learned to do. I documented. I uploaded the screenshots to a private cloud folder, watermarked each one, and wrote a caption. When betrayal becomes rehearsal, silence becomes dangerous. I didn't post it publicly. Not yet. Because now the question wasn't, did he betray me? It was, how many others had he auditioned? That night, I dreamt I was underwater, my wedding dress a net, dragging me down. In the dream, Kendra stood on the shore, watching, not laughing, not gloating, just waiting. And I realized we weren't enemies. We were castmates. Victims of the same script, handed different lines. The only difference? I dropped mine. She memorized hers. The next morning, I made coffee and watched the sunrise without music, without distraction. Just light pouring into a room that had survived the storm. Then I opened my laptop and posted again. This time, just one image, the wedding invitation mock-up, with both their names. No caption. No hashtags. Let people make their own conclusions. Within 30 minutes, it had over 40,000 shares. Someone cross-referenced the hotel receipt with a designer's event. Kendra had been modeling a bridal gown that weekend. Someone else recognized the photographer name on the fake invitation and posted an old engagement shoot, same dress. She'd said yes before I'd even been asked. The internet did what it always does. Split into camps. Camp 1, she knew. She's complicit. Camp 2, she's just another manipulated woman. Camp 3, none of this matters, people get hurt every day. But I wasn't looking for consensus. I was building an archive. A testimony. Not for a courtroom, for the next woman. For the one who finds herself standing in white, wondering why the man at the altar is looking past her. I reached out to Janet, the venue manager, explained what had happened, asked if they had footage, anything from the security cameras that showed Mason and Kendra visiting the site together before the wedding. She responded within an hour. "Danielle, I'm so sorry. I've gone through our internal logs. There was a visit logged on February 10th under Clark Vaughn. They spent 2 hours touring the grounds. Mason told us it was for a renewal ceremony. Said they'd already wed privately. He'd said that. To a venue. On file. 2 weeks before our wedding. He didn't even bother changing the story. Just repackaged it. Same lie, different bow. I posted one more time. A thread, not a statement. I want to clarify something. This wasn't a love triangle. This was a documentary in slow motion. He wrote a story. Cast 2 women. Hid the script from both. And when the performance ended, he assumed no one would keep the receipts. But I kept them. I kept the napkin, the invoice, the screen recordings. I kept the version of myself who almost married him. And I promised her she'd get the final word. So here it is. I don't want justice. I want a warning label on men like him. The comments turned quiet. Not gone. Just softer. More reverent. Because what began as gossip had turned into something else. Evidence. Witness. Legacy. Women began sharing their own screenshots, their own napkins, their own invoices with lies written in the margins. It became a movement, not of outrage, but of record. We aren't crazy. We're archivists. By week's end, a man messaged me. His sister had been engaged to Mason 5 years ago. Short engagement, ended suddenly. She found out he was taking space while dating someone else. "Do you want her contact info?" he asked. I said yes. Because I was ready to meet the others. Not to bond over pain, but to build something out of it. I didn't burn the dress. I published the timeline. 7 days after the final post, I walked into the county courthouse with a manila envelope tucked under my arm and a resolve I hadn't known I was capable of holding. I wasn't there to make noise. I was there to file for annulment on the grounds of fraudulent intent. The clerk behind the plexiglass barrier looked up from her desk as I stepped forward. Middle-aged, sharp eyes behind thick glasses. The kind of woman who's seen everything twice and stopped being surprised the third time. "Name?" she asked. "Daniel Hart." "Petitioner or respondent?" "Petitioner." She passed me the form. I filled it out slowly, carefully. Under reason for request, I wrote in block letters. The marriage ceremony was conducted under false pretenses by the respondent, who knowingly misrepresented his intent to wed for purposes of emotional performance and reputational manipulation. I handed over the envelope. Inside, a printed copy of the venue invoice, ref number VN2047. Screenshots of messages between Mason and Kendra. The drone footage stills Khan. A notarized copy of Grandma Marla's letter. And a personal statement, 5 pages, printed on thick paper, bound with a single brass fastener. The clerk flipped through the documents without comment, pausing only at the screenshots. "Wow," she murmured. "He really did this during the vows?" "Right before the kiss." She looked up at me. For a moment, her face softened. "You're doing the right thing. He didn't just lie. He staged you." I nodded. "I'm not here for closure. I'm here for record." She stamped the form. Afterward, I walked 2 blocks to a bakery Grandma Marla used to take me to when I was a child, bought a cinnamon bun, and sat at the same iron table where we once mapped my imaginary wedding out of sugar packets and coffee creamers. Back then, I thought love was a big entrance. Now I know it's what stays after the lights cut. I took out my phone and opened the draft of my final post. It read, "This will be my last entry. I've shared the receipts, the timeline, the warning signs. I've archived the betrayal. Now I'm publishing the aftermath." I attached a photo of the court form, my name, date, and the stamped case number in bold ink. Underneath I wrote, "He staged a wedding." I opened an exhibit. I hit post. I expected a tidal wave. Instead, I got silence. Not the silence of indifference, the silence of respect. By nightfall, my inbox held dozens of messages from women, yes, but also from professionals. A therapist asked if she could use my story in a workshop about coercive romance. A professor wanted to reference the timeline in her gender studies syllabus. A journalist offered to fact-check everything again for free. And one message that stopped me cold. A man. Not Mason. Someone else. He wrote, *, "I've never commented before. I've been reading quietly. I was raised by a mother who never got to publish her version of the story. Thank you for showing me what record looks like. It matters more than performance ever did. *. I cried for the first time in weeks. Not because I was sad, but because I'd finally been seen outside the script. 3 weeks later, I received a certified check in the mail. Full refund from the venue. No legal battle, no questions. Just a note. We've also removed Mason Clark from our approved vendor list. Thank you for reminding us that business with integrity begins with believing the bride. I smiled. I scanned the check, filed it under reclaimed. Then I called Jess. Our first real conversation since the wedding. She answered on the second ring. "I owe you an apology," she said before I could speak. "You do," I replied honestly. "But what I really want is for you to stop pretending." She was quiet. Then, okay. We didn't talk about Mason. We didn't talk about the wedding. We talked about cinnamon buns in bookstores and the sound of the heater clicking on in the fall. Real things, not costumes. A month later, I spoke at a college campus. Not on betrayal, on narrative authorship. I stood in front of 300 people. Most of them didn't know my name, just the story. I told them the truth. I'm not famous because something bad happened. I'm known because I refuse to let that thing be turned into fiction. There's a difference between closure and clarity. Closure shuts a door. Clarity builds windows so no one else walks into the same trap. The Q&A lasted 45 minutes. Every hand raised. Every student asking the same thing in different forms. How do I know if I'm being used as a prop? I answered carefully. Props don't get to improvise. If your role feels scripted, edited, or fragile under pressure, it probably wasn't written for you. It was written about you. And they wrote it down like scripture. I received one more letter from Mason. Email this time. No subject line. No greeting. Just, "You really built something out of this, didn't you?" I didn't reply. Because that wasn't a question. It was jealousy. And I don't write sequels to liars. I walked away with the receipts. He walked away with rehearsal notes. End quote. And I didn't just end the performance, I refunded the audience. A year to the day after the wedding, I returned to the venue. No camera crew, no announcement, just me, a plain coat, boots crunching over late winter gravel, and a letter folded inside my pocket. Sunrise Crest looked quieter than I remembered. The chairs were gone, the altar dismantled, the rose arbor stripped bare, its vines curling like the memory of a stage no longer used. The air was cold, but dry. I walked the path slowly, past the reception hall, past the stone steps, until I stood in the exact spot where he lifted my hand, where 1,000 eyes had watched him make me part of his monologue. I stood there again, alone. This time, I wasn't holding anyone's hand. I was holding my own story. I reached into my coat and pulled out the letter. Not from Grandma Marla, from me. To the next woman. I crouched and tucked it between the ivy at the base of the podium, weighing it down with a smooth black stone I'd brought from her garden. You may never see this. But if you do, and if you feel like the world is staring at you but no one is seeing you, this letter is your mirror. You are not a prop. You are not late to your own life. Leave the ceremony. Begin the truth. I stepped back, closed my eyes. For a moment, I let it all pass through me. The sound of the wind, the silence of an absent audience, the memory of applause that never belonged to me. Back at home, I finally opened the wedding storage box. It sat in the hallway closet for a year, untouched. Inside were the remnants of a ceremony that was never real, at least not in the way I thought. I didn't cry. I cataloged. One embroidered veil. A set of white heels percent. Vows I never delivered. RSVP cards signed by people who never looked me in the eye after the wedding fell apart. The guest book with 3 blank pages at the end. I flipped to the first empty page and wrote, "The bride left herself a message. You weren't the failure. You were the fire escape." I closed the book and packed it away. Not in shame, in completion. Weeks later, I visited Grandma Marla's grave for the first time since the funeral. I brought flowers not white, red. The same color she wore the night she told me. Some men don't fall out of love, they just run out of script. Her headstone was simple, exactly how she'd wanted it. Marla E. Hart, 1929, 2024. She stayed standing. I sat beside her and read her the closing lines of my manuscript. It was finally finished. And it didn't end with revenge or grief. It ended with record, a footnote for the women who come next. The publisher called to say they'd secured the title. Not the staged bride. Not left at the altar. Just the woman in white. I smiled. For the first time in a long time, the name didn't sting. It didn't feel like the ghost of something unfinished. It felt like an echo I'd followed all the way home. The book came out quietly. No billboard. No podcast tour. But it sold. And women passed it from hand to hand like sacred evidence, like a mirror they could carry in their purse. The last chapter included a checklist. 10 signs you're in a script, not a relationship. 5 things props are never allowed to do. 3 ways to reclaim the mic. 1 letter to the bride you might still become. Readers wrote back. Not with reviews. With their own timelines, napkins, invoices. Typed out conversations they hadn't dared reread in years. And with every story, the archive grew. I never heard from Mason again. Not directly. But I saw eventually that he'd closed his consulting site. Someone emailed me screenshots, a Reddit thread accusing him of recycling wedding vows across multiple relationships. Another woman claimed he coached her through a proposal he was planning for someone else. A post appeared titled, "The Performance of Love, a Case Study in Emotional Fraud." No names. But everyone knew. It wasn't vindication I felt. It was relief. He had stopped performing. Or at least, people had stopped clapping. One spring morning, I taught a writing class at a women's shelter. The prompt was simple. Write the sentence that saved you. One woman wrote, "He told me I was too loud, so I bought a microphone." Another wrote, "I wasn't the storm. I was the house he couldn't enter." I watched their pens move across the page like hammers breaking glass. And in that room full of survivors, I finally understood what Grandma meant when she said, "Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you say out loud before you go." I didn't marry a man. I married the idea of one, and then I divorced the silence. On the anniversary of the annulment, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a single item, a red velvet box. I opened it carefully. Inside, the engagement ring, the same one he gave me. But the diamond was missing, just the band. No note, no message, just that. I stared at it, then smiled. Because even stripped of the stone, the symbol still meant something. Not promise, not forever. Just proof. Proof that I lived through it. And proof that I never needed the diamond to begin with. He performed his vows. I lived mine. And that day, under the same sun, I married my own damn name.